we are all here today to talk about the business case for diversity and inclusion, not only in the tech industry, but also in general. And I suppose it is a bit strange that we still have to have these conversations in 2021, but it is what it is, and so we are going to get kicked off. My name's Nuala Murphy. I am Head of Business at Diversity Mark, which is the awarding authority for an external accreditation for organisations wanting to commit to best practice for diversity and inclusion. I'm joined today by three people I've known for a couple of decades now who have, more recently Fergal, I know you're laughing, that would be me telling fibs, but I've known Gareth and Ritu through the different jobs that I have and roles I've had in this space, primarily around Lean In and the work that Lean In Belfast has done in trying to create a more diverse and equal world for women in the workplace. But I'm going to hand over to each one to introduce who you are, where you're coming from today, and maybe just give us a snippet as to why you agreed to be part of today here at Digital DNA 2021. So why don't we start with Gareth?
Thanks, Nuala. So I'm Gareth Quinn, co-founder and COO of Kairos. I've known Nuala for quite a while. Actually, first time we came in contact with each other was at this event back in 2013. When I used to be heavily involved in it and had asked Nuala, who was CMO of Total Mobile at the time.
Sorry.
And had asked Nuala to come along and speak, actually, back 8 years ago, which is hard to believe. So the reason, apart from being blackmailed by Nuala to be part of the panel, that I want to be part of it is something that we struggle with, to be honest, trying to build out a company which benefits from being diverse. We're a startup company. We're now in revenue as of this past 12 months, so we're still early stage, small enough workforce, but it's something we're very mindful of, but it's something we struggle massively with. So I think my role on the panel is that person who probably aspires to having a really good and impactful diversity and inclusion policy, but really hasn't got a clue how to do it, and hopefully trying to bring a bit of real life to the problems that exist.
Thanks very much, Gareth, and I think that's so important to share just where you're standing on that, because there are a lot of organisations who feel the same, and it's only through having the conversation about it and the realities of that there's more chance of people actually making a difference. Over to you then, Ritu. We've known each other quite a while, but I'd love you to introduce who you are, what you do, and
hello.
You know why you're here today.
First off, if you want to ask me why I'm here today, my honest answer is because you asked me. Well, you and me, we go back quite a long back, and I knew Nuala from Lean In, I guess, and a few other things as well. So I can't pinpoint which one exactly when I met you the first time. But yeah, we go back a long way. And who am I? Well, I am the founder of iEngage IT, and I founded my company in 2016. Since then, I've grown from one person to a team here in Belfast, London, India, and we recently started our office in Belgium, and this year in Malaysia as well. So we're growing, we're a fast-growing company, and we are a very diverse company. So that was one of the reasons when you talked about the business case for diversity and inclusion. I thought, yes, why not? And secondly, because this is my first in-person outing since COVID struck us. So since, I guess, March 2020, this is the first time I'm coming out and meeting people in person and right here on the stage. So, and the best people around me. So yes.
Thank you, Ritu. And then over to Fergal. More recently, we've come into contact in my current role with Diversity Mark. You sit on the panel as one of the independent assessors for organisations who sign up. But in your day job, Fergal, will you share with us what you do and also why it's important to come to events like this, for not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's good for business and society at large?
So, thank you. My name is Fergal McFerrin. In my day job, I'm the Northern Ireland Programme Manager for Stonewall, the LGBTQ+ rights organisation. And since 1989, we've been working to promote, extend and defend the rights of LGBTQ+ people. We now work in all parts of the UK. And my responsibility on a day-to-day basis is largely to support employers across Northern Ireland in relation to building inclusive cultures for LGBTQ plus staff, as well as customers, clients, and service users. And on top of that, as Nola said, I'm an independent assessor for Diversity Mark Northern Ireland. So I guess my reasoning for being here is because I believe in the importance of inclusive workplace cultures and employers who care about diversity and the contribution that can make to transforming Northern Ireland as a whole and increasing the pace of change in society as well. But beyond that, I think it's about creating space for people to ask questions they may not feel comfortable to ask otherwise. And quite often I find people are fearful of asking something and getting it wrong, and that becomes the barrier to doing anything at all. So hopefully this will be an opportunity for people to learn and to go away and to take steps and act.
Thanks very much, Fergal. Gareth, I'm going to jump back to you on this because, you know, from the outset, I've always known you to be someone who's really wanted to find representation in anything that you've done, be it when you were putting together events for Digital DNA, thinking about your recruitment for the development of Kairos Tech and getting the best minds involved in that. What would your observations be for, as you quietly said, someone who's continuing to aspire to build a more diverse and inclusive workforce? What have been your biggest challenges that maybe we can help you work out, or that anyone in the audience could help you with as well?
I think it's damn hard to do. That's maybe just me. But even, you know, back from 2013, whenever we had the first Digital DNA event, through to a few years ago, whenever I was still involved, it was difficult to even get. You know, whenever we think about diversity in Northern Ireland, in Belfast context, you think male, female, and that's just where you go to. So back then it was, right, let's make sure we've got a balance of male, females. And then you realise that diversity is far, far more than that. And usually it's other people pointing it out to you and making that very clear. So it was very hard even to do that, to try and get a mixture of representation of speakers and delegates and etc. And then even just trying to build out your own company, it arguably becomes even more difficult because, you know, we're a technology company, so there's plenty of females in technology, but nowhere near the same amount of males. We're also a sports technology company, which also arguably has a lot more male interest than female interest. So we find it really, really hard. And I think the reality is, if you think about the purpose of a business, it's to succeed, it's to represent the shareholders, it's to drive profits, it's to be successful, to be sustainable and grow. And to do all of that, it's a nice thing to be able to say we've got a diverse workforce, but it's more important to be able to say the diverse workforce drives performance, which drives profits, which drives everything else. So I think we find it hugely difficult, to try and achieve, and you know, we can feel sorry for ourselves because we are technology and we are sport, but there's certainly more that we can do. And without sort of rambling on too much, I think the way that I try to simplify it and think about it is the sort of twofold: the acquisition of talent and the retention of talent, which is quite a crude way of putting it. And you know, in theory, I know a little bit about the acquisition. You know, writing job descriptions in a certain way, for example, that will lend itself to a certain gender, a certain ethnicity, for example. There's the acquisition of talent, which is the bit that we really, really struggle with. The retention piece, we feel we're better at that because we, you know, maybe it's not written down anywhere, but we try to gender a culture of belonging, you know, where people, back to what Fergal was saying, where hopefully, you know, and the staff will probably have their view on it, but hopefully where they don't feel worried about, you know, saying something which is going to be wrong or being shot down. And that idea, whether you're Andrew, the CEO, you know, or you're someone who's just come in a graduate role, you're still willing to challenge and to throw stuff out into the mix. So simply we would divide it into that acquisition piece, which we struggle very much with, and also the retention bit, which we think we're a lot better at.
And you say there, you know, the benefits of, just because it's the right thing to do doesn't mean that everybody's doing it. And the benefits of having a more diverse workforce are about profits, are about those with more diverse boards. They raise more money, they're better performance, more diverse product teams, they're more creative and more innovative and representative. And just this week, the Women in the Workplace and McKinsey launched their 7th report into diversity and inclusion and what it looks like for women in the workplace. So post-pandemic, pandemic, it turns out that women have actually stepped up as leaders and are taking on more roles and have kept businesses going. However, they're not getting the recognition for it. And so that's a problem, amplifying the work that women in the workplace do and celebrating that. Separately then, women of colour, there hasn't been a lot of change in the workplace from 2019. And this brings me over to you, Ritu, because although you're a woman in tech and a woman of colour with your own business, having worked also in-house, you're also the founder of the Browns Cafe, which is something that you were motivated to do in recent times. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that today so that we can tell more people about what you're doing and how we can get involved.
Yeah, sure. So the inspiration for Brown's Cafe actually started a long time back. So I have a 20 years of long career as a woman in tech, in fact, as a woman of color in tech. And all through my experience, I was usually the only female member in the tech teams. You know, in my organizations, there were women who were part of HR and admin, but when it came to actual tech teams, I would be the only woman in the tech teams. And going on, when I started my I Engage IT company, I was very I made it a point that inclusivity and diversity is not something that you add onto it. It was part of the culture, you know, we build the team to be inclusive, diversity, because I think in a way we have come a long way away from tokenism of diversity, you know, in terms of having numbers and tick boxes. It's much more than that. Especially you can probably hire diverse workforce, but if you want to retain them, you have to be inclusive. You cannot take them for granted. If they don't feel they belong there, they will leave you. You know, so there's always a continuous struggle to get them, first of all, to hire the workforce, which is diverse, and also be inclusive. So in all of this, what I've seen is that inclusivity is very, very important. You know, you can get the numbers, but if you're not inclusive, you can't retain the client. And in today's date, businesses need talent to thrive, any business for that matter, and you cannot ignore a large pool of business to thrive and to succeed. So it's very important from that perspective, even for businesses to be inclusive, you know, and that to be part of their culture rather than, you know, thinking of it as an add-on. It never works that way. The other thing is that in any organization, I think the inclusivity and diversity, it cannot be part of something that your team builds. It has to come from top. You know, there has to be willingness from the leadership position to have it as part of your culture, you know, deep-rooted culture in your team to make everyone welcome and be inclusive. I would also say that, you know, coming back to why I started Brown's Cafe, is that I have a long career in tech as a woman of color. And it's fair to say that I've seen the good, the bad, and also the very ugly of it. But at the same time, having said that, I cannot deny the fact that there were people from across the sector and across the communities who supported me, especially in past 5 years of my journey with iEngage IT. I have got support from people who have belonged to different sectors, different communities. And I really want to celebrate that, you know. And I don't claim to be an expert in race relations. I understand these are very complex issues and have many dimensions to it. But at the same time, every time we are talking about inclusivity, racism, anything, we are talking about a lot of negative stories. You know, we will hear about, you know, stories of people who have suffered because of racism or sexism or, you know, so many prejudices which are there. But at the same time, there are people who have gone beyond that and who have succeeded in spite of all that, you know. It's not that everybody who belongs to these communities is not successful or is only suffering because of racism or sexism. There are people who have gone beyond it, who have succeeded, and that's what I want to showcase. I want to add this positive narrative into this communication and all of the narratives of, you know, race relations, sexism, racism. So at Brown's Cafe, all we do is that we celebrate success of people of color. And that is also, in a way, me acknowledging all the support that I got from people across communities. The people who supported me were not always women or, people who were people of color. They came from all sectors. They looked different. They didn't speak my language. They looked different to me, but they still supported me. And I really want to acknowledge that as well, because sometimes we forget to acknowledge this part when we are talking about all the diversity and inclusion. So that's all we do in Brown's Cafe. We celebrate success and we amplify that.
And we'll make the details of Brown's Cafe available after. But I love that because it's also why you're here, for the inspirational piece. And generally, it's easier and better to share how-to for organisations to talk about their diversity and inclusion journeys, their policies, their initiatives. And that's, I suppose, Fergal, you could maybe talk about some of the great observations you've seen as an assessor as part of Diversity Mark, because we've nearly 100 signatories of organisations. We have 8 silver standards now, and the rest bronze, people committing to working towards diverse and inclusive organisations. And through the learning and sharing of positive stories and initiatives, maybe other organisations can follow suit. Do you want to share a little bit there?
So I guess some of my main observations from hearing from organisations who do this stuff and do it well, largely for me, it's organisations who take the time internally to have the conversation with staff, with their stakeholders, with clients, customers and service users about what currently is right and what currently is wrong. Before an organisation ever marks International Women's Day or sets foot at Pride, it's about having a serious conversation internally about what you actually want to achieve. So before you do any of those things, it's about figuring out what is the impact we actually want to have, what do we want to change that needs changed, what is the improvements we want to make to people's lives and lived experiences. And for me, yes, it's absolutely important to business in terms of diversity of people improves decisions that are made. People will be more effective working as a team if they're able to be themselves at work. All of those things are important to business, but also beyond that. In Northern Ireland particularly, the business community is incredibly important to driving social change. And we will build a more prosperous society if we are more diverse, inclusive and cohesive. And quite often when we've had periods of political instability, the only thing that's kept people coming to Northern Ireland to invest is the talent that's already here and the businesses that are already thriving. And beyond that, I think about the people, particularly LGBTQ plus people who left Northern Ireland. Some of those who have returned, it's because of the progress we've been able to achieve by those businesses who have helped to drive change. And, I think about the fact that next year will be the 40th anniversary of the decriminalisation of homosexuality in Northern Ireland. It took almost 15 years longer than it did in England and Wales. But the reality is, if we are to attract those people back, if we're to attract talent from right across the world, we have to continue to drive progress. And it's things like the commitment of employers in every sector, right across the public and private sector, to continue to do that will allow us to continue to thrive as an economy. And I think those are some of the things, the clarity of purpose as to why you actually want to do this. And broadly, I would say, the one piece of advice is pick 3 things and do them well, rather than have some kind of vague, fluffy commitment that you're not actually really sure what it means. If you can pick 3 things and determine what it will actually look like to drive success from that, whether it's quotas or more people being applying for roles, or whether it's less people leaving and quoting certain things in your exit interviews, those are the types of things that are important to actually drill down and understand what's going on within your organisation. Particularly if you don't already know what the composition of your staff is, if you're not asking questions or not asking inclusive questions, can you start to ask those questions and then monitor and analyse the information that you do have in terms of, well, actually, are certain groups of our staff less engaged or less satisfied than others? If that's the case, then that's your starting point.
Brilliant. Some really great insights there, and thanks for sharing that, Fergal. Gareth, I'm going to jump back to you, because before we met up a week or so ago and we were chatting about the importance of diversity and inclusion, and I know personally it's something you're really committed to, and indeed Kairos is going to sign up to Diversity Mark, but in the real hard face of business, You're now on the other side, right? You are a founder. You're building a technology product that's going to scale globally in the next couple of years. You appreciate the importance of having a diverse workforce, especially from product and growth. But when it comes to looking for partners for your business and to enable your growth through finance or investment or partnerships, how has that conversation around diversity come up?
Yeah, it has more recently, and I suppose the important thing I believe is that selfishly, us as a company, we want diversity, right? So I would find it very hard to see any companies out there who says, yeah, diversity is not for us, right? So we want it, and we selfishly want it, and the reason that we want that is because our customers are very, very diverse. So our Kairos is a communications platform for elite sports teams. So we've currently got customers in UK, we've got customers Ireland, Canada, US, Singapore, Australia, more recently New Zealand, and I'm probably forgetting. So it's a very diverse customer base. And if you take a customer like Manchester United that you'll have all have heard of, you can imagine how many different how many different backgrounds there are of people playing for Manchester United Football Club. So for us, our workforce needs to reflect their needs because we're building a platform for them to use. And if they don't find our platform useful because it doesn't reflect their diversity, then it ain't going to work. So selfishly, we want diversity, regardless of all the niceties that you hear around why it's a lovely thing to do. So selfishly, that's what we want. And again, back to what we're talking about, it's that acquisition piece and retention piece. There's arguably an issue around, like I'm sitting here even thinking to myself, why are we not acquiring, to use a really crude word, enough diversity? And arguably it's because it doesn't exist. One, we're already struggling because we're a sports company, a technology company, but if you look at Northern Ireland and how different it is to Dublin, for example, you know, that diversity arguably doesn't exist. Now, we still should be doing more. From a retention perspective, Ritu was saying about how it needs to be driven from the leader, and I agree with that. The slight balance I think that we need to have is that if it's driven by a leader, or if it's only driven by a leader, it becomes compliance, it doesn't become culture. So the leader needs to drive it, but it needs to be embedded throughout the whole organisation, and that goes back to what Fergal was saying about feeling safe in that environment and being able to ask those what might be silly questions or giving an opinion. So a bit of a few thoughts there, but to bring that right back, we selfishly want it with VCs over in the US, with customers in the US, and they're asking us questions like, what is the makeup of your board? And we're going, well, why does that matter? Here's the lovely product. And they're going, well, we want to be assured that your board is diverse. Well, why does that matter? So regardless of why it matters, right, and we all know why it matters, but regardless of that, we're now having to deliver that. There's VCs out there that will say to us, sorry, we can't invest because your board isn't diverse enough. So our retort to that would be is we want it to be diverse. We just can't find that diversity with the skill set, the experience, and the knowledge that we need. So if you're a serious VC playing in that space, help us to make the board diverse. So it's now becoming a requirement for us and not just a nice to have, even though it's something that we selfishly want to do anyway.
And you know, as a field founder, recovering founder, I think that it's so refreshing to hear that there's been such a shift in the VC world that VCs are saying, no, I know it's not good for you because, you know, you're all guys, but for the female founders or the founders of minority groups, that there is almost a mandate there. And, you know, with 2% of venture capital in the UK going to women founders, I'm glad to see it actually changing now. You know, when we started out talking about diversity and inclusion 8 years ago, it was a nice to have. But now, I mean, Ritu, you talked to me about it. Do you not think that the businesses here, like what Gareth is saying, we want them all to talk like Gareth? We want them all to know the business benefits and embed it in their culture. Have you seen that change? Because you do work with global clients locally and internationally. Have you seen that shift?
I think yes. I think there is a conscious effort to have that in every business. But at the same time, a business needs to make money. We can't deny that. You know, it's all about your accounts and turnover at the end of the story. So especially I think for startups like the ones Gareth is working in, it is very, very difficult, but because at the same time, they also need to take care of their, you know, your sheets, account sheets as well. That is very important for them to go to the next level. That is important, and balancing both the things is the key here, you know, and again, I would say tokenism. I think we have come a long way from tokenism. It's not about what the leadership looks like. It's what they are doing. They are implementing. Look at the whole team. Look at the whole picture. Not just concentrate on how your founders look like or talk like. I think we have come a long way from there, but still a long way to go, no doubt.
So I want to shift in a little bit more. We're in Digital DNA 2021. It's a tech conference for technology sector, and maybe focus a wee bit on product and product development. Quickly, Ritu and Gareth also. And I suppose the benefits of having more representation, more diversity when it comes to product development and products that are designed for the customers that need them. I remember one of my first jobs, I worked for a manufacturing company of Sani bins and vending machines, and I sold them to blue chip organizations. And the head of product was building a sanitary bin for women, right, in the toilets. It's something that we need to dispose of our towels. And it was supposed to be an innovation, but the innovation was designed by a guy who didn't have any idea of what that process and that journey looked like. So if you're talking about a product, the women in the room, those who menstruate, will know what I'm talking about. So when he brought the product, and I was often one of the only women in the room, and he brought it out and he demonstrated what it would be like. He was 6'5", getting into a cubicle, sitting down, using the pedal. It was going to be something like this. And that was an early example of how maybe not doing your research and using data to inform your product development hit him and everybody else up the face. So I suppose whether it's technology or physical products, is there any insights you can share with people building technology products, Ritu, and what they really need to think about? Because that is very much your area of expertise.
Absolutely. As long as you are a small player, a small company, and catering to a small subset of population in a small region, it's fine, for a business to say that, oh, diversity is an overhead for us. But if you are thinking of going big, if you have big dreams, diversity is no more an overhead. It is a requirement, because if you are talking to your diverse clients, they would want to look at solutions that you're providing which actually solve issues for them. And you can't do that if you don't have those capabilities or those people in your team who can understand their issues and can give them a viable solution for that. So for a business who is looking to go to the next level and not just remain themselves in a small region, they need to have diversity to cater to that global clients.
And Gareth, you also have representation, your clients, with women's teams. Have there been any differences or any feedback points that you've received from the women's teams that you could share regarding the product and the men's teams and the scheduling?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've had to do with Kairos is build it out in such a way as that it's agnostic by sport. So whether it's a soccer team, rugby team, or basketball team using it, it needs to work. And I think that's helped us make it agnostic by gender, ethnicity, or whatever as well. But in saying that, we literally an hour ago, we noticed that on social media, we just announced that that we're now working with the Scotland women's international team. And we've just done a deal yesterday with another international women's team, and we've just signed up our first NBA women's team, which we haven't announced yet. So there's a few women's teams on the go, which is great. So there hasn't been a massive amount of feedback about the core Kairos offering, which is good. But one of the insights that we did have, I remember being asked a question one time, and you can imagine, being the guy in the room, in 2021, we shouldn't be freaking out, but you sort of do, and you're asked the question, how does Kairos help with women getting the best out of performance based on their menstrual cycle? And I did the whole, that would be an ecumenical matter, or whatever answer I give to dodge it. But there actually was something really important behind that, in that there are platforms out there that will look at how a female athlete can get the best out of her body based on where she is with the menstrual cycle. And whenever we hear that, we're saying, well, what's the value add that we can bring as a company? And we've got three options. One, forget that we ever heard it. Secondly, we go and we build it ourselves, which is an area of expertise that we don't have currently at the moment. Or thirdly, we go and we partner with someone that does have it. So now that we're starting to work a little bit more with those female clubs, we're starting to learn a little bit more about things which are nuanced, and that's only based on gender diversity, obviously, as well. So part of the ignorance that we have. Whenever we set out as a company, we spoke to the pale mail and steel guys, you know, across the desk, and it was all about soccer or rugby. We never even entertained the idea that there was a female market there for us, because you were just trying to survive, and that's what you were doing. And now that we're working more, not just with female clubs, but also teams in Singapore, et cetera, we're starting to be challenged a lot more around what we should and shouldn't be doing as a product.
That's so encouraging to hear, and I think one network that you should check out is the WOW Women of Wearables, who do a lot of development in that space, and happy to make those connections after. You mentioned there about gender, and I suppose, Fergal, you could jump in here. Sometimes we get a bit of pushback when it comes to diversity, Mark, on the bronze stage, focusing on 3 gender goals, and sometimes people think, well, why is it just gender? We're doing loads of stuff for our female staff. Why is it just gender? Do you want to share a wee bit around that? Because I think that's a really good question, for one, but it's also a good explainer when it comes to why we focus on gender. And it also touches on your point, Gareth, as to why when you start with gender, the rest is more likely to happen and flow, because you're already on that journey.
So I think part of it is about organizations, when they tend to first kind of step into the field of diversity and inclusion activity, when they start figuring out what they should be doing and what they should be prioritizing, sometimes spreading yourself too thinly means you don't do anything right, and you end up having potentially doing more harm than good. Sometimes I think starting with one thing, whether it be gender diversity or LGBTQ plus inclusion or whatever it might be, really focusing and driving down into the detail of what's wrong and what you want to achieve and what you want to get right will help to get into the mindset of the detail and action you should be taking across the board. But it will also help you to learn and tweak and plan along the way. And, you know, I just reflect on the conversation that we've just had about what diversity and inclusion really means, and what, you know, we talk about it in those terms here, but what we're really talking about is power and influence. And in the decision-making process within a business, who has power and who doesn't. And actually, you may well have diversity, but you may not have inclusion, but all of these things are wrapped up in the power dynamic of business and the internal of the organization. And if you have the diversity, if you're managing to attract and retain a diverse talent pool, so be it. But if you're not including those people in the decisions, if they're not involved in the decision-making process, if they're not involved right through, then you're not going to have inclusion. And you need to have all of the components of that process together before you really have the impact that you need to have. Otherwise, you're not really achieving anything at all. So to your original point in your question, I think it's important really to focus down into something that you can get right based on your organization and where you are, to replicate that success beyond that. And it doesn't mean, you know, you may be doing 3 things and reporting to Diversity Mark about gender diversity, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing anything else. It just means that you should be specifically thinking about what you are doing and how you can measure success, so you can take those learnings and replicate them along the way.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm conscious that we do have quite a few people and organisations in the audience, and I would love, if there's anyone that has a question they'd like to bring to our panel of experts, really raise your hand and I'll get you a microphone. Niall, I'm counting on you. I'm in the business of making people feel uncomfortable.
It's working.
Thank you.
Yeah, so a lot of companies, just when kind of starting out, whether you're a small firm or a large firm, where's the starting place? Is it just, is diversity about, because sometimes I think people want to kind of tick boxes, and is it just really having effective leadership and having empathy is the real starting point? Or, you know, is it a case of just going out and working with providers and getting some ideas on how to kind of put a policy in place? So where's the kind of the starting point for companies that are starting on the journey?
Apart from signing up to Diversity Mark and committing to your external accreditation, I think, you know, who would like to, you know, give some advice, some tips there? Gareth, you're a small company, and Niall's represented here from Glandor Network. So again, a family-run business who's trying to do the best for their customers.
Yeah, I don't know, Niall, is the answer. You know, whenever you do, like, you think about what we've been through, myself and Andrew sitting on a park bench at a charity event. He's got a problem. I say, what's everybody else doing? Then all of a sudden this journey kicks off. And you go through this run off, validating it, having lots of conversations, having something that you can actually show and put into a club. And then you're going, we need some money. And this journey just starts. Like, at what point there do you sort of go, oh, stop a wee second here. What's our policy around this? And to be fair, we're probably in that grind now where we've got a lot. Now, our company's still small, I think 12 people at the moment. So it's still small enough. But the employees are nearly demanding that off us as leaders, if you like. So it's probably around now. Prior to that, like you mentioned McKinsey in 2018, they did a report around, what I referenced earlier, that leadership piece. If it comes from the top down as compliance and it needs to be borne by the people below. But the word that you used, empathetic, was in there. You need to have that empathetic leadership. And I think certainly, hopefully I brought a bit, but Andrew certainly brings that to the company, and like everybody's got a voice, everybody's bought in. If we have any discussions about the company, where we're going, everybody's part of that because we've still got the luxury of doing it. So I don't know what the answer to your question is. I know that it's now being demanded of us, but arguably we were doing some of that good stuff already. Not to give any impression that we're top of class here. We have much of a clue of what we're doing really. But
you're on the journey, and it's all about the journey, and everybody can do something individually, to better the situation they're in. So it's not overnight, Gareth, as well. And I know you're hard on yourself, but at least you're committing to recognising what's happening, and also commitment to doing some change over time. And it's going to be 130 odd years before we have gender equality in the workplace, folks. So it's not a sprint, it's an ultra marathon.
No, on that, like one of the things that we did was we have signed up to the diversity mark because we need that guidance. We need that Northern Star as to what it is we should do. And it's something that again, sometimes you're only in the moment here that you're reflecting on all of this. And the reason probably that we haven't been thinking about that from the start is because there's been no other Northern Star, and that can be diversity mark. But Fergal mentioned it earlier on, telling that story. We're great storytellers in Northern Ireland, and I think if there was more stories being told as to why diversity had such great impact around performance at the early stage, there's more people like me would be inclined to listen. And I know it's not just about gender, but we're really bad at telling that gender diversity story here. And whenever I have a 13-year-old daughter, he's now starting to tell me about what the way the world should be. But even the story from a gender perspective that should be inspiring her, we just don't tell that story. Names like Liz Rainey from PwC, who was here this morning. You've got Claudine Heron, who runs one of the biggest companies in Ireland, phenomenal lady. Nick Lacoy runs a manufacturing company outside Lisburn. Louise Smith runs a recruitment company here in Belfast. There's so many amazing women here, and we don't tell that story. And if we did, then people like me might earlier take up notice and go, right, we should start to think about doing this differently and learn off what's worked previously before.
Ritu, were you going to add to?
Yeah, sure. I think you had a valid point there that we don't tell those stories. And that's what we do at Brown's Cafe. We celebrate success and we amplify their stories. So in terms of your question, I think it's very important to have those policies in place. But at the same time, don't let yourself stop with all those policies in place. Keep an open door policy because there's no one size fits all for, when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So keep it open, have those conversations, and just make everyone feel at welcome in your team, and that's all. That's the key. Be honest about it. It's not just about tokenism, as I said. Don't just stop at policies.
And practically, Niall, as well, in meetings where, the stats tell us that when there are meetings with women in them, women are typically interrupted more often than men, by men and women. And women's ideas are often taken over and repeated back to the room, and so you can be an advocate, and you can also amplify the women or others in your meetings and make sure that they're being represented in networks, because there's a lot of evidence to tell us practical tips, and go to leanin.org and you can see them there. Diversity Mark have a global resource pool, but I think what Ritu and Gareth are saying is that we can all do something. And don't be put off by the policies. Maybe think about listening to your staff and what they want to see.
So to reflect on the question, I guess, this will never be done, certainly not in my lifetime, in terms of achieving a truly inclusive society. And so first thing, I guess, is pace yourself. But beyond that, I also think the piece that I said earlier about clarity of purpose is important, understanding what exactly it is you want to achieve and why, and then ensuring the people who need to be involved in those conversations are involved. So both in terms of staff base, but also clients, customers, and service users, because it needs to be driven from listening to the needs of those people. And if you're not doing that, then what you end up achieving won't be reflective of the impact you actually want to have. And beyond that, I do think it is about understanding the needs of those various audiences and ensuring that you're doing it in a targeted and a practical way, where quite often the conversations I have with employers, particularly in Northern Ireland, at some point they'll always say it's that they want to collaborate with their sector to deliver something. And really what that often, more often than not, means is that they want to wait until they're better and then tell others within their sector that they're better than them, rather than actually collaborating with one another to deliver change. And so the other thing I would reflect from our experience in terms of working with businesses across sectors is really collaboration should mean collaboration, not one-upmanship.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I wonder if there's anybody else that maybe feels that they want to ask a question. Yep.
I've had a lot of chats today with people about, getting in at the grassroots and getting in at the school level, and it's not happening, and how do we get more women and other groups interested in technology early on. Have you got any thoughts on that? There seems to be a lot of divergent opinion and sort of not one common body or common theme of how we do it.
When you spoke about getting more kids and children involved and interested in it, so I've been part of something called as Bring It On. So as part of Bring It On, we visit the grammar schools and secondary schools, and we talk to, usually because I'm a woman in tech, I would go to the girls' schools and I'll talk to the kids there and tell them my story and, in general talk about what their thoughts are and what stops them from coming there. So what happened in one of the instances I would like to share here is that when I was done with that, I was coming out and two of the girls who were actually non-white, they came and they told me, this is the very first time we have seen a woman who's non-white come here and speak to us. And we are amazed because all we hear as part of all the diversity initiatives that are happening is that this can happen to us, that can happen to us. And, everything targeted at our, what I would say as white classmates, what they can do to get us involved. But I sincerely feel personally that these things have to be mutual. It has to come from both. And now you can come here and hug me yourself, and I may not respond at all. But that's not a collaboration, right? For that, we need to shake hands. We need to both come forward and have that willingness to do that. So it's not just that, one thing we always forget is that we are always preaching about the other side, what they can do, what they can do, what they can do. But we forget to involve the other side as well, why it is important, and, to showcase them that there are people who have still gone ahead and done things. And, there are people out there, not everyone will want to bring you down because of your race or your sex. There are people across sectors who will support you and who would genuinely want to see the good for you. And, that is very important is what I feel, to have that cohesiveness in between all the sectors of the society, and to talk about all those stories as well. So kind of bit of more positive approach to it rather than, bashing and blaming one side of the society that they haven't done this or, because they have done something wrong for a long time. But there has to be a very positive narrative that why they want to do it rather than bashing them. And, I don't think that is a sustainable way of doing it. It has to be mutual as well as, it's not all the responsibility lies with them. The responsibility lies on both the sides. So I think that's a more sustainable way of achieving diversity and inclusion.
So in terms of getting, kids, girls especially, but boys as well involved in technology, I think we overcomplicate the hell out of it, to be honest. I know there's lots of good companies and some of them are here today and they put a lot of money into that. But an example that comes to mind, I was chatting about him earlier on, a guy called Patrick Michalewski, who recently sold his company Novosco. He ran an event, 2-day event in his old school, St. Ronan's, in Cookstown, a 2-day event, and literally just invited loads of people to come and got the kids to come along for 2 days in the hotel, whatever you call it down there, and literally got these people to tell them stories about what they were doing, and they left buzzing. And like, how much did that cost? Maybe £1,000 for lunch or whatever, nothing more. Whenever we, an MCS group who are in here, whenever I went to them back in 2014 or something with this random idea, I want to bring a team of kids out to Silicon Valley for an all expenses paid trip as part of Digital DNA. And I got these weird looks of how you're going to do that. And the reality was it was really, really easy. We held an event at City Hall. We invited all these schools to come and pitch their idea to a team of judges. MCS group supported it, not just with money, but with staff, etc. as well. We rang Aer Lingus and said any chance of giving us free flights to San Francisco. They did. We got a sponsor to pay for accommodation. And we brought and I remember the 3 girls especially that we brought out, 13, 14-year-old, 3 girls, just flew them out, brought their teacher as well. Met with Sarah Fryer, who was a Square at the time, Facebook, Google, etc. Didn't cost Digital DNA any money whatsoever. I had the trip of my lifetime, never mind the 3 kids that were there. And we do overcomplicate the hell out of it, unfortunately, and I think we can do something. And if you think about it, the key here is schools, right? Because I remember the big challenge that we had then, without going off on a bit of a soapbox here, was that the schools wouldn't engage. So I said, what do you mean you won't engage? It's free. These kids are going to love it. You can go to California. But the careers teacher or the school teacher, and every school is not the same, but they were like, well, I've got this to do, I have to check in the class that morning, I've got this exams to mark or whatever. And the key thing is the government needs to invest in one point of contact in every school whose job it is to drive excitement around careers. And that wee nub in itself. And I remember going to a minister in the assembly one time, and he says, he said to me, right, what's this idea? I'll pitch it to me. And I goes, no, I've got the solution. You're the guy with the money. You pitched to me that you're the guy to drive this, and you didn't go anywhere. So I do think we overcomplicate the hell out of it, unfortunately.
And you know, it goes back to we cannot be what we cannot see, and also that it is not a one-size-fits-all, that there are many different ways that we can enable young boys and young girls to see what diversity looks like in the workplace. You know, I'm a mum of 3 boys. It's important for me to see a woman up on a stage to be inspired by them as it is for them to see a girl up there, or a boy up there. And I think there's many different ways that we can do it. When we strip back funding, influence, power, PR, and just marketing, and think about what does it take to inspire a child, kids they learn bias. And that comes from school, that comes from education. And it's about telling the different stories, telling the story. I'm just seeing one inspirational founder in the room, Becca Hume there, who I'm going to get to stand up and wave to everyone because she's a story that so many young girls and boys need to hear about. And also what that looks like, what success looks like. So education is definitely one, and a joined up approach. Like with companies, those who run the employee resource groups are volunteers. They're not paid. They're already overworked. They don't have any funding, and it's a nice to have for the companies. Some larger companies are investing into those groups so that you get an extra, an extra amount on your salary to recognise the work that you're doing. So it's about the education. It's about the recognition of the work that's already going on. It's about the true collaboration. Not everybody going for the $3,000 grant, but coming together and seeing how together we can apply for more money to make and affect more change. And again, it would be great to have other ideas and connections come out of this panel discussion on how we can help facilitate that both with Diversity Mark and the relevant organisations that we represent here. Any other questions there? No, it's a final. Well, I mean, before we're going to wrap it up now, but I'd love to maybe just get top tips or top comments from each of our panelists on, I'm starting with you, Gareth, again, on the business case for diversity and inclusion. What would you tell any business out there, Gareth, that they need to do right now?
I honestly am not qualified to tell a business to do anything. Genuinely, I do think the storytelling.
Suggest.
Well, the storytelling piece for me, like my challenge would be back to you guys at Diversity Mark. I'm not sure it was within your mandate or not to do this, but tell the stories of the companies that's doing it well. Those bronze, those 8 silvers that you have. Tell that, tell that story so companies can and go, okay, that's how I do it, because we still don't have it cracked. So I'll reverse that challenge back onto you guys.
That's perfect. Thank you. That's a good plug.
I can say merely from what I have experienced, for any business to go to the next stage, if you are looking to grow global, diversity is no more about good to have, it's a must have for your business. You need diversity in your team to cater your global clients.
Thank you, Ritu and Fergal.
I guess just to reflect on some of what others have said, that this is not really that complicated. It's about understanding lived experiences of people who may be different than you, and applying that into a culture that really respects the firms and welcomes them, and finding a way to do that authentically, and understanding that it's going to be an ongoing journey.
Thanks very much. And thanks everyone for sitting throughout the talk, and thanks to my panelists for being bullied into coming here today by the sounds of it. But we will be connecting, we will be sharing the content from the talk, and hopefully there'll be some resource for you to go and check in at a later stage if you need some help. But please do reach out to all of us in your in our relevant roles, and if we can help, then we will. Thanks very much. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nuala.